The champagne was Dom Perignon. I noticed. It was hard not to notice when my sister Victoria hammered the name into every guest's mind exactly 14 times during the toasts. Her voice, honed in investor presentations, clearly engraved every letter. Dom Perignon. "Look," she said, "and be envious." Her marriage to Bradley Hamilton III wasn't just a wedding, it was a strategic acquisition, the main social landing of the season. The flute glasses, thin, crystal, catching the reflections of the garlands, probably cost more than my rented apartment in a neighborhood where taxi drivers are reluctant to go. Or at least, that's what my entire family thought, including my distant cousins. "To the happy couple," my father proclaimed, raising his glass again, for what felt like the 20th time. His cheeks were already flushed with the noble drink and parental pride. "May your success multiply just as Victoria's company has multiplied this year." I bared my teeth in a smile, an exact copy of those on everyone's faces, and raised my glass. My lips touched the cold rim. Playful bubbles burst on my tongue, tasteless from the abundance of flattery in the air. I looked around the Hamilton Grand Hotel's ballroom. It shone like a sterile operating room. Thousands of garland lights hung from the vaulted ceiling, ice swans frozen in eternal grace, white roses cascading from every column, every windowsill, suffocating in their own luxury. Victoria hadn't skimped, although technically one can only skimp with one's own money. There was a rustling of silk nearby. My mother leaned against my elbow, her Vera Wang dress a menacing white frigate in a sea of dark tuxedos. "Rachel, darling, you look—" Her voice faltered, scanning my simple navy blue dress, bought from that same online dress shop whose name she couldn't even pronounce. "Thanks, Mom. You know, Victoria offered to buy you something more appropriate, something designer. Isn't it too late to change if you have something in the car?" There was a pleading look in her eyes. "Don't embarrass us. Don't stand out by not fitting in." "I'm comfortable," I said, my voice surprisingly soft. "This dress fits perfectly." She sighed, a heavy, thick sigh that had been hoarding for me for years, a mixture of disappointment, fatigue, and some ancient, unspoken shame. "I'm just worried about what the Bradley family will think. They're very particular about appearances. They have their own standards." "I'm sure they're focused on Victoria today, Mom, as they should be," I snapped before she could elaborate. The music faded, and the DJ's voice, thick and loud, announced the father-daughter dance. I froze, watching as my father, erect and dignified, led Victoria to the center of the room. Her dress, which had cost an inhuman amount of money, flowed behind her like a materialized dream of perfection. The guests respectfully surrounded them, turning into a chorus of admiring shadows. At that moment, my phone vibrated in my small, undesigner purse. A message from Marcus. "Conference call with partners in Singapore. Still Monday?" The corners of my lips twitched. I quickly typed, "Yes, 8 a.m. their time. Make sure the quarterly reports are ready. And stop pretending you work on Sunday." "You know, Rachel," Cousin Derek appeared at my shoulder, languid, scotch in hand, "there is a job out there. A real one. I could put in a good word for you. An entry-level position, of course, but with a future." His breath smelled of whiskey and condescension. "That's very kind, Derek. I'll think about it," I replied, looking over his head at the dancers. "It's just," he leaned closer, confidentially, "has it been 5 years since you left your last normal job? Everyone's worried. Living off savings isn't a career plan." "No," I agreed politely, feeling the chill of the champagne descending down my throat. "Not the plan." Applause erupted in the hall. Victoria, beaming, slid to the microphone. Bradley's arm, solid and bronze, wrapped around her waist like a trophy ribbon. Her smile was dazzling, victorious, the smile of someone who hadn't just won, but won publicly, in front of everyone they wanted to impress. "Thank you all for being here today." Her voice, clear and confident, filled every corner. "This is the happiest day of my life, surrounded by everyone I love. Well, almost everyone." A light, knowing chuckle ran through the rows. My stomach tightened into a small, cold, and very hard stone. I want to thank my family. Dad, you taught me that success is the only option. Mom, you showed me what grace under pressure looks like. She paused dramatically. Her laser-sharp gaze found me in the crowd, pinning me in place. And Rachel, my little sister, for being my cautionary tale. The laughter grew louder, more confident, less feigned. I'm serious, Victoria continued, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Every time I wanted to give up, close the company, take the easy way out, I looked at Rachel and thought, this is what failure looks like. This is what happens when you don't squeeze every last drop of juice out of yourself. My mother, standing in the front row, nodded. Her face was a mask of sympathy. My father put an arm around her shoulders, a show of solidarity in the face of family shame. She couldn't even hold down a normal job, Victoria's voice rang out in the ensuing silence. A complete failure. But I still love her. The room erupted in applause. My parents applauded. Bradley's parents, a pair of surgeons with polite bewilderment on their faces, clapped cautiously, as if they were at a medical conference where they were suddenly opening a living patient. And I started dancing lightly, quietly to the background music that began pouring from the speakers again. My feet executed the small, graceful steps I'd been taught long ago, in another life, when I still dreamed of a career in dance, before I'd found my true calling. Aunt Patricia's gaze caught my eye from across the room. That special, measured mixture of pity and malice blossomed on her face. She barely raised her glass in my direction. There was no toast, just a silent, mocking, "Well, there you go. We told you so." I spent the rest of the evening flawlessly. I congratulated. I stood at the edge of family photos, the very spot where I was easiest to frame. I ate a perfect, sterile $300 dinner with tuna tartare and golden caviar. I praised the wine. I was a ghost, a perfect, unnoticeable guest. At 9:47 p.m., after the cake had been cut and Bradley had slipped his hand under Victoria's hem for her garter, she found me at the dessert table. "I hope there's no hard feelings about my speech," she asked. It wasn't a question. It was a report. I remained silent. "I just wanted people to understand my journey, how far I've come," she said, adjusting her diamond earring. "Having in mind the example of my sister, who couldn't even finish her MBA, it adds context." "I understand," I managed to squeeze out. "It's just, my key investors are here today," her voice lowered, more confidential. "It's important for them to see. The Hamiltons have connections to Wellington Capital, and I'm trying to close a Series B round. They need to see that I'm the successful one in the family," Victoria explained, as if revealing a great business secret, accessible only to a select few. She tilted her head, regarding me with the air of a collector appraising a slightly faded but still intriguing specimen. "You know, I could find something for you at my company, something administrative perhaps," she said, pausing to let the generosity of the gesture sink in, "if you finally want to do something with your life." "That's very generous of you," I responded, my voice as calm and even as the surface of a lake on a windless day. "Well, family is family," she sighed, adjusting the perfect fold in her dress, "even if some of us contribute to it more than others." She dashed off, carrying a cloud of $400 perfume with her, leaving me alone with a half-eaten piece of cake and the silence that rang in my ears after her words. At 10:15 p.m., I slipped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, fresh, real after the hall's exhaust-laden atmosphere. The Hamilton Grand hovered above the city, and the city sparkled in response with a million lights, cold and distant. I pulled out my phone. My finger found the number in my favorites list. "Marcus, yes, I know it's late." My voice was different now, clear, devoid of any fatigue. "I need you to run Protocol 7, yes, for Hamilton Industries, in its entirety, and also withdraw the Belle Reve account. Everything should be returned to home base via the offshore chain. No, tomorrow morning will do. Let them enjoy their wedding night." I had just hung up when the door creaked behind me. "Ah, there you are," my father said, stepping out onto the balcony and loosening his tie with relief. Mom's looking for you. She wants a family photo by the ice swan before it turns into a puddle. I'll be right back, I nodded. But he didn't leave. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the same horizon as me. You know, Rachel, Victoria didn't mean to offend you today, he began cautiously. I know. It's just, she worked so hard for everything she has, built a company from scratch. Mom and I are so proud of her. And we should be. She's impressive. And you? He turned and looked at me directly for the first time that evening, without that usual shadow of concern in his eyes. You had such potential, honey. I don't understand what happened. That consulting job, you were so good at it, and then you just left. I started working on some projects, he said, using air quotes, whatever that means. It means I've found something more meaningful, Dad. More meaningful than success? Than being a fulfilled person? There was a genuine, almost childish confusion in his voice. I smiled at him, sincerely, even though I knew he wouldn't understand why. Dad, what does success look like to you? He gestured around me. This, what your sister has, a thriving company, a profitable marriage, respect, the opportunity to throw such a, he waved his hand toward the room, without thinking about the cost. What if I told you I could throw 10 of these parties without thinking about the cost? I asked quietly. He laughed, not maliciously, but with gentle condescension. Rachel, darling, I've seen your apartment. I've seen your car. You don't have to pretend in front of me. I'm not pretending. Then you're mistaken, his voice softened. What's worse? He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. Look, I know I was stern. Maybe I pushed too hard, but it's not too late to fix everything. Victoria's offer. You should take it. I'll think about it, I said, as I always did when there was nothing else to think about. We returned to the ballroom together. The party was gaining momentum. The musicians struck up a lively tune and guests crowded the dance floor. Victoria sat like a queen at the head table, surrounded by her entourage. And I saw something interesting. Bradley's father, Dr. Jonathan Hamilton, was talking to a man I recognized at a glance, David Chen, a senior partner at Wellington Capital. Their heads were leaning close together, their conversation seeming intensely focused. My phone vibrated again in my purse. A message from an unfamiliar number. Miss Monroe, this is James Whitfield from First National. We urgently need to discuss the Bellaref Holdings account. Please call as soon as possible. Without hesitation, I muted the ringer and tucked the phone into the bottom of my purse. At 11:30 p.m., the cake was cut. Victoria and Bradley, smiling frozen, perfect smiles, plunged the knife into the multi-tiered mass of sugar and sponge cake. Camera flashes captured their faces, and applause sounded like a predictable soundtrack. And again, my mother appeared at my elbow, a haunting shadow. Rachel, you should go talk to Bradley's cousin. He's single. He has a reputable practice. Mom. How are you feeling, darling? You're 32. You're not okay. You're running out of time. Time for what? I asked, looking straight at her. She looked at me as if I'd asked why the sky was blue. For everything. For a career, for marriage, for children, for being important. I am important to myself. It's not enough, her whisper became sharp. It was never enough. She squeezed my hand in hers, cold from the champagne glass. I just want you to be happy, really, not whatever that is right now. It's contentment, Mom. That's what happiness feels like when you're not putting on a show for anyone. She shook her head sadly, as if I'd uttered something in a dead language, and drifted away. The reception continued. I danced the obligatory dance with Derek, listening to his monologue about the future of Bitcoin. I chatted with Bradley's grandmother, a charming old woman, who asked what books I liked. I avoided my sister, which was easy. She was too busy basking in the glow of her triumph. At midnight, the party began to dissolve. Guests filed out. Victoria and Bradley prepared for their ceremonial exit. Rose petals, like the final chords of this symphony of vanity, were already at the ready. Just then, Victoria's phone rang, insistently, shrilly, breaking the sweet moment of her latest triumph. She ignored the first ring, hugging her new mother-in-law, a fake tear of gratitude glistening on her eyelashes. But the phone didn't stop, insistently buzzing again and again, intruding on her perfect world. "Just answer, baby," Radley gently nudged, his brow furrowing slightly. "Maybe it's important." Victoria excused herself and stepped aside, pressing the device to her ear. I watched as her face, which had just beamed with absolute victory, began to change. First, there was mild confusion, a static in the perfectly tuned reception. Then, disbelief, as if someone had spoken something to her in perfect English in an unfamiliar language. And then something I'd never seen before appeared on her features. Pure, undiluted animal fear. It wiped away all her confidence, like a rag wiping dust from a mirror. "What do you mean, brought out?" Her voice, breaking, sounded louder than she'd intended. It cut through the hubbub, and several guests turned around. "That's impossible. We have contracts. We have—" She darted to a quieter corner, but her words, abrupt and sharp, still reached me. "Anonymous investor, majority stake, breach of terms, they can't do it." Radley, his face tinged with worry and confusion, followed her. Several men in impeccable suits, the same ones from Wellington Capital, exchanged glances, and something sharp and professional flashed in their gaze, the scent of blood in the water. At that moment, my phone shook softly in my purse. Message from Marcus. Protocol 7 has been completed. Bellerive Holdings has officially disaffiliated from Hamilton Industries and all subsidiary accounts. Victoria Hamilton's company has approximately $847,000 in operating capital remaining, enough for 8 weeks of operation at current expense levels. Also, James Whitfield from First National tried to contact you. He says it's urgent. My fingers slid across the screen. "Tell James I'll call him on Monday. And thanks, Marcus. Go to bed." Victoria returned to the center of the room. She was as pale as the marble of her ice swans. Her flawless makeup now looked like a mask stretched over living despair. Bradley was hugging her, but her body was rigid, inflexible. She only shook her head from side to side, as if swatting away invisible wasps. My father was already there, his celebratory mood replaced by patriarchal anxiety. "Victoria, what happened?" "The investor," her whisper was loud, shrill, full of horror. "That anonymous investor, with 51% of the company. They're taking everything, everything." "What? Why? What happened?" My father's voice became firm and businesslike, but panic was evident in his eyes. "I don't know. The bank president called himself James Whitfield. Can you believe it? He says Bel Air Holdings is immediately withdrawing all $47 million. They're citing some clause in the contract, some clause about social responsibility, about ethical standards. I haven't even read it. My lawyers—" David Chen materialized next to me, his face impenetrable and cold. "Victoria, I just consulted with my partners. This, unfortunately, radically changes the situation regarding your Series B. Without Bel Air's backing, your risk profile is unacceptable." "David, please." Her voice became thin, childish. "I'm sorry. The terms will have to be renegotiated from scratch." My mother circled around like a wounded bird, her face a grimace of practiced social anxiety. "Victoria, darling, I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. There's intrigue in business. Tomorrow, Dad will call all his—" "Mom, you don't understand," Victoria almost screamed, and real tears were in her eyes. "Without this money, I have 8 weeks, 10 if I fire everyone. Everything I've built is over. Simply over." A whisper spread through the room like wildfire. A successful bride, a company gone bust, shame, a golden girl on her knees. I remained at the dessert table, finishing my champagne. Aunt Patricia floated over to me. The former smugness in her eyes was replaced by a greedy, predatory curiosity. "Did you hear? Victoria's in trouble. The investor ran away." I heard. What a shame. And on her wedding night, her voice was sweet as syrup and just as sticky. I suppose success isn't as permanent as it seems. I suppose not. Well, at least you never had to fear that it would happen to you. She patted my hand with icy fingers. That's the advantage of having nothing valuable to lose. Everything has its advantages, Aunt Patricia, I replied softly. She drifted off, carrying the news, and I was left alone. At 12:45 a.m., the phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. Miss Monroe, thank you for your reply. James Whitfield's voice was collected and respectful. The Belier partners insisted on an immediate settlement. No problem, James. So, the exit is complete. Are we sending the funds to a standard holding account or, as discussed, to a new acquisition? To the holding account. We'll discuss the purchase on Monday. Excellent. Also, Ms. Monroe, the CEO of Hamilton Industries has been trying to contact Belle Reeve. She's extremely upset. Should I provide her with your contact information? I glanced across the room. Victoria sat defeated, awash in her dress. Bradley was massaging her shoulders. My parents stood nearby, like lost children. No, James, I'll contact her myself, when the time is right. Understood. Anything else? That's all. Thank you for your efficiency. Always at your service, Ms. Monroe. And congratulations. The ROI on your investment in Hamilton Industries was 327% over 3 years. An exceptional result. Sometimes you just have to know when to leave the table, James. Exactly, ma'am. Good night. I put the phone down and caught the waiter's eye. Another champagne, please. The wedding was officially over, but it seemed no one was leaving. The unfolding drama had become the final, most exquisite course of the evening, far more captivating than fondue or a melted chocolate fountain. The destruction was at its climax. At 1:15, my father found me, his face gray with fatigue and stress. Rachel, your sister needs support now. This is not the time to sit on the sidelines. I've offered my support before, Dad. She chose a different kind of help. That was before. He waved a choked hand toward their table, where Victoria looked like a small, crushed creature in a sea of white silk. She's your sister. Whatever is between you, she needs a family now. I rose slowly, smoothing my modest, dark blue dress, which suddenly felt like armor rather than mere fabric. You're right, Papa. She really does need a family. I walked through the emptying hall. The sound of my heels, a precise, measured rhythm, echoed in the silence. The guests, pretending to gather, froze, their gazes, greedy, sharp, piercingly fixed on me. They were anticipating the scene, a pathetic loser coming to console a fallen queen. How ironic. Victoria looked up at me as I stopped. Her makeup was smudged and dirty tear streaks lined her cheeks. Her perfect hairdo had fallen apart, a few strands clinging to her forehead. For the first time in years, she looked less like an icon and more like a person, my sister. What do you want, Rachel? Have you come to mock me? Her voice was hoarse, lifeless. No. Then what? Go away? I pulled out a chair without being invited and sat down across from her, straight ahead, looking her in the eye. Bradley leaned forward defensively, but I ignored him. Victoria, do you remember helping me with math as a kid? She blinked, confused, as if I'd spoken a different language. What? Fractions, percentages. You sat with me for hours. You never got angry. You never called me stupid. You were endlessly patient. Yes, I remember. What does that have to do with it? I've been thinking about that girl all evening, wondering where she went. Victoria's face twisted into a grimace. She grew up. She learned that the world doesn't tolerate sentimentality, that it rewards the winners and tramples the weak. She learned to be tough because no one else would. Is that what happened? Or did she just put on a mask of toughness, and underneath it she became more and more afraid with each passing year? I'm not afraid of anything. You're afraid right now. Your world has collapsed in an hour, and you're panicking. And that's normal, Victoria. Human. Don't pretend you understand my world, she hissed. You ran away from it. You don't know what it's like to have everything and watch it all crumble to dust. Actually, I said quietly, but loud enough for everyone around the table to hear, I do. What are you talking about? You have nothing to lose. I have Belair Holdings. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Victoria froze. Bradley sat up so abruptly that his chair creaked. My parents, standing 2 steps away, exchanged glances of utter incomprehension. What did you say? Bellary Holdings, the anonymous investor who poured $47 million into your startup 3 years ago, the entity that owned a controlling stake in your company, or rather, owned it until this evening. It's me, Victoria. I am the founder and sole owner of Bellary. The silence around me became absolute, echoing. No, she shook her head, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. No, this is some kind of sick, ugly joke. You're incapable of such a thing. I silently pulled out my phone and dialed the number, putting it on speakerphone. James, sorry to bother you. Could you briefly confirm the ownership structure of Bellary Holdings for everyone present? James Whitfield's voice, clear and official, filled the air. Of course, Ms. Monroe. Bellary Holdings is a private investment company founded 7 years ago. The sole beneficial owner and managing director with full powers is Rachel Elizabeth Monroe. All decisions are made solely by her. Do you need further clarification? No, thank you, James. I hung up. The sound was deafening. Victoria looked at me as if I were an alien who had just shed its human shell. 3 years ago, I began. You were looking for an investor. Through intermediaries. You didn't know it was me. But I studied your business plan. I saw potential. And I decided to give you a chance, despite everything. You invested $47 million in me, she said it like a mantra, trying to comprehend it. I invested in a promising business. And the fact that my sister was running it, it had to be just a coincidence. A pause. At least, that's what I hoped. I took a deep breath. The exit clause in case of ethical violations. I wrote it myself because I knew you. I wanted to believe you'd changed, but I needed insurance in case your arrogance outweighed your common sense. Ethical violations? Her voice shrieked. I didn't violate anything. You publicly humiliated your key investor in front of 200 guests. You called me a cautionary tale, a loser. What happens when you don't give it your all? My voice was cold as steel, but inside I was shaking. You violated Clause 7.3 of our agreement, prohibition of public defamation and damage to the investor's reputation. You signed it. I didn't know it was you. The contract doesn't say, except if the investor is your sister whom you despise. You violated the terms. The exit is legal. Victoria turned to Bradley, her eyes pleading. There has to be something. Your lawyers, your connections. Bradley wasn't looking at her, but at me. There was something new in his gaze. Not contempt, but cold, calculating respect. He shook his head slowly. Victoria, if everything she says is true, then yes, she has every right. You signed, you violated, she can take her money back. But this is my company, my life's work. Her cry was hoarse, tearing from the very depths. And it was my money. My voice was quiet, but every word fell like a honed blade. My money. The money that paid for your first office, your staff, your marketing campaign. My money, which ultimately financed even this. I waved my hand, outlining the ballroom, the garlands, the wilting roses. Every time you told the story of how you built it all yourself, you built it on my foundation. My mother stepped forward, her face ashen. Rachel, you can't do this. She's your blood. She's my sister, I nodded, looking straight into her terrified eyes. The same sister who spent the last 10 years whispering in everyone's ears that I'm a disgrace to the family, who didn't invite me to the engagement dinner because I didn't fit in, who used her happiest day today to make me a laughingstock. And at what point, Mother, was I supposed to say, enough? This is revenge, my father hissed, his voice rough with anger and confusion. Dirty, vile revenge. No, Revenge is letting her company burn to the ground. Revenge is sending a press release to every business publication tomorrow morning. Revenge is buying her debts and demanding immediate bankruptcy. I rose slowly, feeling every muscle tense, but my mind cold and clear. It's just accounting, Dad. Renegotiating the terms. Rachel, Victoria suddenly grabbed my hand. Her fingers were icy and tenacious. Her eyes, finally, were free of masks, only naked, primal pleading. Please, I'll apologize to everyone. I'll tell everyone who you really are. I'll do anything. Don't ruin my business. I looked at her hand clutching my wrist, then looked up. Do you remember what you said to me today, offering me that administrative position? The one about generosity? She shook her head silently, tears welling up in her eyes again. You said, family is family, even if some of us contribute more than others. I gently but firmly pulled my hand away. You were right. Family is family, and today I made the biggest contribution I could. I turned and walked away. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea. Their gazes revealed not just shock, but a kind of awe. They had witnessed an earthquake that had shifted every tectonic plate of this family. My father caught up with me at the massive doors leading into the foyer. Rachel, stop. We need to talk about this. We'll discuss it on Monday, Dad. I'm open from 2 to 4. What office hours? He looked at me as if he'd never seen me before. The managing director of a fund with $2.3 billion in assets. I smiled, and this time it was genuine, a gentle smile. Sign up through my assistant, Marcus. You'll find his contact information. I stepped out into the night. The air was cool and clean, washing away the smell of champagne, perfume, and lies. A black car was waiting at the curb, as agreed. As I climbed into the soft back seat, my phone vibrated for the last time that evening. An unfamiliar number. A message. This is Bradley. Victoria is in terrible shape. Is there a way to fix it? Name a price. I glanced at the dark hotel windows, where I knew a drama comparable to a Greek tragedy was currently unfolding. Tell Victoria to read Section 12 of our agreement, I typed, the investment recovery clause. She has 30 days to comply with all the terms. One of them is publicly acknowledging the true source of her success, her choice. I sent the message and leaned back in my seat. The city lights outside merged into golden rivers. Tomorrow, the financial news outlets would explode with headlines about Bel Air's sudden exit from Hamilton Industries. My phone would start ringing off the hook. But now, in this silence, I was just Rachel, the little sister, the loser who had somehow quietly, stone by stone, built a fortress while everyone laughed at her sandcastles. Fatigue washed over me like a sweet, victorious wave. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give them a shred of the satisfaction they craved, to see me broken. I held the power to destroy my sister's life in my hands and offered her a lifeline. A harsh, humiliating one, but a lifeline nonetheless. That's the difference, I thought, watching the flickering lights. Victoria built on ostentatious confidence and borrowed money. I built on patience, silence, and a simple truth. Success is worthless if you lose yourself to achieve it. The phone rang one last time. Marcus, everything okay? The office is ready for Monday. I smiled to myself. Everything okay. See you at 8. Outside, the night was beginning to lighten at the horizon, heralding the dawn. A new day was dawning, and some of us were greeting it, finally seeing each other and ourselves in our true light.